It started in 2016. I was living in Manhattan, and I wanted to be really close to God. I wanted to see just how close you could get. If I could just get a little bit closer, that would be amazing. Like, we're talking about God here. And you read about God speaking to people, and I'm just like, can I get just a taste of that? Like, just a taste would change my life. Yeah. So I was looking at my resources to do that, and I thought, hey, why don't I start with the Book of Mormon? They're always pushing that. And I wasn't an avid Book of Mormon fan at that point, but I thought, I'm just going to experiment. So I took a Book of Mormon, and I prayed, and I said, like, help me, like, get people to read this, basically. And I'm like, my way of doing that is, because I don't like going up to people, is I'm going to just read it everywhere I go in the city. So I took my Book of Mormon, and I kept my promise, and wherever I went in the city, whether it was on the subway or through Times Square or down the street, I was reading it or holding it. My walking around took me to Roosevelt Island, which is a little strip, is a little island in between Long Island or Queens and Manhattan. So I got there, and at the very tip of the island is Roosevelt Park, and I was there and I was reading, and I thought about all the people in the city that had seen me read the book, and I just, on that island you can see the whole city, a dramatic landscape of buildings, because you're right there. At that moment I was reading, and I read in the Book of Mormon in Alma, where Alma is talking to his son, and he's saying, I'm going to pass on the plates to you, and he says, but you have to treat them with care so they don't get lost, because one day the whole world is going to read it. And then he says, behold, you may think this is foolishness in me. And it just hit me, like, you may believe this is foolishness in me. And I thought about all the people in New York, the hundreds of people that had seen me read. And I just, like, at that moment, like, the weight of the city and the rejection, and, like, also, like, my own, like, you hear things about the church, they just come up, and it just, like, bothered me at that moment. I grew up in Virginia. There weren't a lot of members. And whenever something church came up, it was just hate. I just got a lot of hate, just a lot of, like, well, what about this about Joseph Smith, or what about this? And it's just like, oh my gosh, like, I was just getting hit with it all the time. So it just kind of, you don't want to listen, but it just kind of builds up, and at that moment it just bubbled. Yeah. When I read that scripture, at that moment, I just, like, cried out to God, like, in my heart, like, with this book, and just like, are you there? Like, it was like a really big feeling. And I said, if you are, and if you hear me tonight, when I go to the Ward FHE, because I was going to help the missionaries with some investigators, when I go and the missionaries give their lesson, have them read this scripture. We went, and I wasn't expecting anything, but sure enough, as they gave the lesson, they gave it on charity, because, very basic, like, it's for investigators. And then they just said, we'd like to close with the scripture. And then they read, behold, you may think this is foolishness in me, but by small and simple things, blah, 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 blah. And whoa, from now on, like, I cannot take anything lightly. Like, I've got to read my scriptures every day. I've got to pray. Like, I got to go, I'm just like, I've got to, because now I know so clearly that there really is a God, and he endorses this Book of Mormon, and therefore this church. Like, what are you supposed to do with that knowledge? I'm totally okay with whatever questions or doubts I have, because, oh my gosh, that was basically my experience, that they read it. And I texted the missionary later, because we were texting, and I said, like, why did you read that? Why? Like, looking for some other sort of explanation. And they just were like, oh my gosh, like, we weren't, obviously, that wasn't a very relevant scripture, but the Spirit just really told us to. I feel like, honestly, a lot happier a lot of the time. I'm kind of like a worry kind of person. I have a lot of things I'm stressed about, like, with my family and, like, my life. I'm just like, is this going to be okay? But I can relax, because I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a God who is totally aware of me. I just feel like I'll just be more relaxed and happier and more at peace just because of that experience.